You are now listening to Clay Mohr, the American storyteller.
I was on my way to the yard one late morning when Angie called me. "Hey, Clay," she said, "Joey Lemontia is here. I figured I would call you to see, when you were coming in." Tell him I should be there in about 20 minutes, I replied back. "Tell him to wait for me as I do need some stuff." "Okay," Angie said. "You're really running late. You okay, Clay?" "Yeah, I'm all right. I had to help a damsel in distress. Yeah, just tell Joey to sit tight, and I'll tell you all about it when I get there." "Okay, see you in a bit, but I can't wait to hear this one." I had been out looking at a job site, and as I was on my way back to the yard, like to go this way. It's always a pretty drive. I finished the last of my coffee, and as I put the cup back in the cup holder, I could see four-way flashers on the shoulder of the road. As I got closer, I could see a lady outside in front of this thing on her cell phone. I don't know if she can get service out here, I thought to myself. Did you ever notice when someone breaks down or gets into an accident, they get on their phone right away? And in some cases, they walk around in circles. A lot of times, they're calling somebody who can't even help them. And if they are calling someone who can help, it's usually some pirates that paid a lot of money to get their name to come up first on the Google search, which, by the way, they're going to pass directly on to you. Anyway, I had already slowed down, so I figured I would pull over in the front of where she was. I had an old cop buddy of mine, Ben Kistler. He works for the U.S. Marshal Service. He used to tell me always try to pull in front of the vehicle instead of behind it. It can be a little less, intimidating. It's always better to walk towards someone than to come up from behind them. Always made sense to me, I thought. I got out of my truck, headed over towards this lady. "What seems to be the problem?" I asked. "Well, for starters, I can't get any cell phone service, which is why I pulled over in the first place to check my phone." I was right. I hate being right. "Well, at least she didn't try messing with it while she was driving," I said to myself. "There's a lot of curves in this road, and you have to be very careful." But not as many curves as on her. Behave yourself, Clay. These stories are always PG-13. She motioned to me and started walking to the back of her car. Some kind of BMW. I don't know too much about them, but I noticed the AWD emblem under the BMW. She walked to the back of the car and pointed. Seems she had gotten over on the shoulder a little too far, and the back tire had sunk pretty bad. They don't call it a soft shoulder for nothing, folks. "And let me see if I can get you back on the pavement," I remarked. "Why don't you walk up by my truck, so you're out of the way," I said. "Okay," she said. I got in the car and looked down by the gear shift lever and hit the all-wheel drive button, slowly moved it in, onto the pavement, and then to a level spot in front of where my truck was. She walked around and said, "How do you do that?" "Patience," I said laughingly. "And you should really get around to reading the owner's manual," I told her, as I explained to her about the all-wheel drive option. She laughed and said, "I'm Ashley." "Clay Mohr," I responded as I tipped my hat. "Glad to meet you." "Well, how much do I owe you?" She asked. It's okay. I don't want your money." "Well, then, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along." "No problem. I'll let you pull out first and then I'll go." "Okay," Ashley said, and thank you again." "See you later," I replied, and she pulled out and went on her way. I headed back to the yard, thought to myself, "Man, this Joey's probably fit to be tied. I'll buy him lunch or something, to make up for it." I pulled into the yard and pulled up to the first overhead door. No Joey. As I walked toward the office, I could see he was sitting talking with Angie, having coffee. I can just hear this now. "You owe me one, Clay," Angie remarked as I was shaking Joey's hand. "Yeah," I said, "but put it on my tab. And by the way, Donnie's having problems with truck 309. He said he's going to try to make it, get it back here. By the way, how is your damsel in distress?" "I'll tell you all about it," as Joey and I were walking out to the shop. Joey Lementia, part salesman extraordinaire. Wasn't much about truck parts that he didn't know. If he couldn't find your part, either you gave him the wrong information or they don't make it anymore. By the time Joey finished taking my order, I looked out to the overhead door. Here comes Donnie, nursing this thing into the yard, with smoke coming out of the hood, the sides. I motioned to him to pull it up by the door. At about the same time, Joey remarked, "You still got that truck on the street, Clay?" "Yeah, Joey, but not today." Donnie had the hood flipped by the time we walked over. Joey remarked, "Where's Gil?" "Gil's my mechanic. Oh, I forgot. They call them technicians now. I remember when that started several years back. I had a buddy of mine was running the service department at a local Cadillac dealer. He used to tell me, if I have a mechanic work on your car, we can charge $100 per hour at that time. But if I have a technician work on your car, we can charge you $150 an hour." Anyway, Gil's a great young man. Been with me a few years now. I gave him the day off, I said. By that time, we had a pretty good puddle of coolant on the ground. "Water pump," Donnie proclaimed. "Yeah," I said, "it doesn't take a genius to figure that one out." I turned, looked at Joey, add that to the list. "By the way, you got time for some lunch?" "Sure, Clay," Joey responded, "as long as it's those steak sandwiches from that diner in town." "Always," I said. I told Donnie, "Go ask Angie what she wants, and I'll have you, run down there." "Sure thing, boss," Donnie said as he walked back by Angie. I scribbled the order down, and at that Donnie came back. "Get whatever you want," I said. "By the way, what did Angie order?" "A salad, boss. She said she's on a diet." I looked up and said, "She's always on a diet." Donnie kind of chuckled and left. Joey and I went into the break room, sat down. Joey remarked, "Wasn't Gil off the last time I was here?" "Yeah," I said, "they got a young son and He's having some problems. They're doing a lot of tests. Think he might have some learning disability or something. Well, that's good of you for letting him have all that extra time off, Clay. Yeah, I said it's just the right thing to do, Joe. Well, he laughed and said, did I ever tell you about my Uncle Harry? No, I said, but you might as well. You told me about all the rest of your relatives. I got up, poured myself a cup of coffee. Well, as it turned out, this was going to be one interesting story. I'd like to share it with you if you don't mind. Joey was from the south side of Chicago, grew up there. His uncle's name actually was Harrison Lamantia. His Uncle Harry, as they call him, had a push cart or a hot dog wagon as they used back in the day. It had a pole that came up from the side. They came up, off of it when it had a hook. He would hang a kerosene lantern on it so he could, also sell hot dogs at night. The carts were primitive, when you look back, but for that time, they were pretty practical and had everything, you needed. According to Joey, though, they weren't official unless you had the Vienna beef sign on it. Joey said they've been around since 1893. He had a real good following, but over time, all the walking was taking a toll on him, but, at the same time, keeping him healthy. There was a tavern on one of the busy corners on the south side there. O'Malley's Tap Room, they called it, with the legendary Connor O'Malley as your host. Legend has it that a fight broke out in his place one night, and he single-handedly put 4 guys in a hospital. Sounds like my type of guy, I said to Joey. Huh. Oh, yeah, he said. He was a Golden Gloves boxer when he was growing up. But anyway, he went on to tell me that a couple of his regulars, Sean and Danny, were in one night. O'Malley's really didn't serve food, but had the usual bar snacks. Danny remarked, "Why don't you get some food in here?" "I'm in the booze business," Connor said, "not the food business." Danny replied back, "I'm going to take a walk to the end of the block, see if Harry's around." Sean chimed in and said, "I'll go with you," without hesitation. Sean quickly said, if people had something to eat, they would probably drink more. Connor quickly asked, "Who the heck is Harry?" "Hot Dog Harry. Has some of the best hot dogs on the south side," Danny yelled back as he walked out the door. Connor let it go, got back to stocking the cooler. Later on, as he was getting ready to close, he happened to think about what Sean said, about having food. The next day, he started to ask around the neighborhood, about Harry and that. Connor didn't have to ask too much, as everyone he talked to knew Harry and went on without hesitation about how great his hot dogs were. Connor also got an idea, where his stops were, and made it a point to get by to see him the next day. He had come up with a pretty good idea and couldn't wait to talk to him about it. It turned out that Connor's Tavern was right about in the middle of Harry's travels. So he caught up the next day with Harry, parked his car, walked up to where Harry was set up on one corner, walked up to the cart, stuck out his hand, and said, "Connor O'Malley." Harry responded with his hand and reluctantly replied, Harry Lemontia. Glad to meet you, I think. Connor laughed and said, I own O'Malley's tap room over on 53rd Street. Yeah, I know the place. He went on to say, I have a pretty open spot in front of my place, and I was wondering if you'd like to, set up in front there with your cart. Well, Harry paused for a minute, said, what are you going to charge me? Connor replied, absolutely nothing. I figured it would help, my business and, kind of like you help me and I'll help you. Let me think about it for a while and I'll let you know. That's fair enough, Connor said. If you want, why don't you stop by and at least, check the place out? Let me buy you a beer. The two men shook hands again, went on their separate ways. The next day, when a lot of Connor's regulars came in, Connor broke the news. Danny was the first one to speak up and said, heck, I'll go find Harry right now and talk him into it. We got enough guys in here to almost buy him out. Nah, leave it alone, Connor replied. I want to do this the right way. Besides, I ain't one for making people do something they don't want to do. Huh? Is that the reason you put those 4 guys in the hospital? Sean chuckled. Very funny, Connor replied. Harry thought it over, decided it was worth a try. All the walking was taking a toll on him, and he wasn't getting any younger. So, late one Saturday afternoon, Harry decided to make his way over to Connor's tab. Harry was always kind of a quiet guy and very reserved, I guess you could say. What happened next, you could tell he wasn't prepared for at all. When he walked in, you would have thought the Bears just won the Super Bowl. Guys were coming up to him, shaking his hand, patting him on the back, and, just generally happy to see him. You could tell he was a little overwhelmed by it. Sit down, Harry, Connor hollered from the other end of the bar. Harry sat down, and by the time Connor made it down that way, everybody in the joint wanted to buy Harry a drink. Harry graciously thanked everyone and said, maybe next time. Well, it turned out there would be a lot of next times, as Harry accepted Connor's offer of letting him put his cart in front of the tap room. Harry and some of the guys talked for a little while before he had to leave, and as he was leaving, they agreed to have Harry bring his cart over on Thursday so he could be set up for the following weekend. Before Harry headed out the door, Connor asked, "What do you drink, Harry?" Red wine, he replied. I don't have much, but if you let me know what kind, I'll have Maria order some when she, puts my order in. Thanks, Harry said as he was walking out the door, still wondering if he had made the right decision. The following Friday night, Harry was open for business. Connor had taken a little ad out in a local paper and had posted some signs, up in the bar, and other, local businesses made the announcement. As a result, they had a nice crowd. Turns out later that this Connor would prove to be a pretty sharp businessman. The summer went by rather quickly, like they always do, and soon the chilly days of autumn were right around the corner. Harry was doing quite well, and, so was Connor for that matter. I guess out of the clear blue sky, it occurred to Connor, now what is this guy doing in the wintertime? Connor thought to himself some more about it, and I guess I never gave it much thought. Later that night in the bar, kind of brought it up, to some of the customers that were there. Colin, one of the younger guys from the neighborhood, said, "Why don't you get him in here?" Connor didn't pay much attention to it, but later on that night at closing time, he came up with a pretty good idea. He thought, "Gonna run it by Harry, when I see him tomorrow." The next day, when he saw Harry, he asked him how he handled the winter months. "Halloween night is my last night. I always have a bunch of candy, for all the kids in the neighborhood, when they come by. My brother-in-law has a dry cleaner over on 51st Street. I help him out until about March, and then I, start getting ready for the season again." "Well, I got a proposition for you," Connor said. "I own the lot right here. Also, as he pointed to the lot right next to the tap room. I always plan to put a beer garden on it, but the city keeps, getting stricter with all the rules and regulations, and my accountant said it's not even worth it anymore. I thought I could add a small addition, on the tap room. We could put a kitchen in it and a couple of counters, with about a dozen stools or so." "Huh, how much is this going to cost me?" Harry replied. Nothing to start, just cover, some of the utilities and maybe some, rent, once you get going. One of my regulars is a contractor. He said he'd fix me up, not to worry about it. There's kind of one catch, though." Harry shook his head and asked, "What's that?" "Now, you have to give my nephew, my sister's boy Andy, a job. He just turned 18, and he was the youngest of 4 children. The only thing, he's a little retarded." Joey paused for a moment, said, "Clay, you don't hear that expression much. Most people always thought it was, unkind. They now refer to it as, special needs. But back in the day, that's what it was. They didn't know a lot about the different afflictions like autism, Down syndrome, or, ADHD, just to name a few. It turns out that in this case, Andy had Down syndrome, but it was at a lesser degree." Harry took a step back and said, I just don't know." Connor went on to say, "The kid's really no trouble at all, "Nah, that ain't it," Harry replied. "I'm just real particular about my hot dogs and all." Joey paused and went on to tell me all about Chicago-style hot dogs and how precise they needed to be. He made the process and described it, step by step. I replied, "Wow, I never knew that about him." Joey finished the description by noting the biggest no-no of them all: never, ever put ketchup on a Chicago-style hot dog. Some places won't even make it for you if you order that way. He said if you really want to see something bad, order one with ketchup only. Some places will throw you out of the joint, tell you never come back. Anyway, Joey continued. Said Harry, being the kind soul that he was, decided to at least, meet Andy and see if this whole thing could work out. He said to Connor, "All right, Bring the kid down this Saturday before I open, and we'll have a talk, the three of us. Connor smiled and said, "Thanks, Harry. I owe you one." "Nah, there's nothing for sure yet," Harry quickly replied. "But if you buy me a glass of that wine," Maria ordered, "it probably wouldn't hurt." Harry always got going early on Saturdays, and it was, the busiest days of all his days, and he opened up around 11 in the morning, which was about an hour before Connor did. Harry got to his stand that Saturday, and there was Connor and Andy sitting on the bench in front of the tap. Connor waved at Harry and said, "Come on in. We can, all sit down at a table." They both got up, and Andy followed him closely into the bar. "Harry, this is my nephew, Andy." "Glad to meet you," Harry replied as he pulled up a chair at the table. Andy was a very quiet young man, but Harry could tell that he understood everything he was saying. But most of all, his eyes never left him. He paid attention to everything Harry and Connor talked about, even if it was just small talk. After about a half an hour, Harry finally told Connor, "Let me think about it tonight, and I'll let you know tomorrow." Harry paused for a second and said, "As long as Andy's here, I guess he can sit on the bench and at least watch me." Connor got up, said, "Fair enough," as he brought Andy out to the bench. Andy just sat there for a couple of hours, never uttered a word, but never took his eyes off Harry. Harry eventually packed up for the day and headed home. He figured he'd run it by his wife, Carmela. Andy had, a little bit of a hard time communicating. Well, Harry forgot the news travels fast in this neighborhood. He got home and wasn't in the door 2 minutes when Carmela proclaimed, "You better hire that young man, Harrison." She always called him Harrison when she wanted to get her point across. She went on to say, "That young man deserves a chance to prove himself. You're in a position to help him. You owe it to him and the neighborhood that has supported us for so many years." Well, Harry didn't have to think twice about it, as he knew he was never going to win this one. All right, Harry said back to his wife. "I'll tell Connor he can start helping me out, and we'll take it from there." Carmela must have known something Harry didn't, because it turned out that Andy was an instant hit with all the customers and the people in the neighborhood. Once Harry showed him the ropes, a little more, he was like a machine when it came to making hot dogs and preparing some of the other items. Harry had one of those big pump dispensers of ketchup on the front counter. If anyone ever requested ketchup on their hot dogs, Andy would just snarl and point to the dispenser as Harry rang up, their items. As time went on, Harry, along with everyone else, really grew fond of Andy. One morning, as Harry was busy preparing everything for the day, Connor stopped in to say hi. "I just wanted to thank you again, Harry," he remarked, for taking Andy on with you. Harry quickly replied, "One of the best things I ever did," as he was dicing the last of the onions. He then paused for several moments, looked up at Connor, and remarked, I've learned one thing through all of this would be never prejudge anyone or any situation. You just never know. Time went on with the help of Andy. Harry did well, along with Connor's tap. They all made a name for themselves. Harry knew it was getting close, to retirement. As all the years of walking with his cart and the cold weather had taken a toll on him. He and Carmela had talked about going out to Arizona on occasion, but looked like it was going to become a reality. Through it all, Harry had one thing in the back of his mind: Andy. What was he going to do? Carmela always said, don't worry about things have a way of working out. Harry was finishing up on a Saturday after a good day and waited for Andy to leave. He locked up, went next door to the tap room for a glass of wine in the hopes of breaking the news to Connor. Maria came over and poured Harry a drink. At about the same time, Connor came out from the back and sat down next to Harry. Harry turned to Connor and said, I got something I want to talk to you about. I already know. Carmela was already talking to Andy's mother. Connor chuckled. I'll leave it up to that Carmela, Harry thought as he was shaking his head. Don't worry about it. I think I got a solution, Connor exclaimed. Turns out Andy had an older brother, Brian. Well, Brian's time was up with the Marine Corps and he was coming home. Connor, he had already talked to him about taking Harry's business over and working together with Andy. Connor made arrangements to buy, Harry out over time. It was a win situation for everyone. Shortly thereafter, Harry and Carmela retired to Arizona, where they lived for many years. Joey paused for a moment and said, Clay, I really don't recall much, after that, but when my husband, my uncle passed, I went out to Arizona to help my Aunt Carmela. She showed me a letter that Harry had gotten from Andy's mother several years later. She wrote that Connor had passed away and had left the majority in his business to her, Andy, and Brian. She went on to say that it looked like they were going to be set for the rest of their life. She thanked Harry from the bottom of her heart for believing in Andy and giving him a chance. Joey remarked, well, I guess I took up enough of your time, Clay, as he picked up his order forms. I'll get this in as soon as I get back to the store and put a rush on that water pump for Donnie's truck. As Joey got in his car and pulled out, I thought about Andy and then my mechanic, Gil. I hope everything works out for their child as it did for Andy. At that, Angie yelled out to me, Clay, I got a message from an Ashley. She said to call her when you have time. Ashley, I said, you know, your damsel in distress from this morning. How did she get my number? Angie laughed and said, Clay, your name and number is all over the sides of your pickup truck. I just shook my head and said, okay, just leave her number on my desk. But that's another story for another time. Bringing the past to the present. I am Clay Mohr.